Okay, are we live? Y'all, my stream has not been working. I just sat and spoke for a good 18 minutes. A good 18 minutes. Y'all, my stream has not been
There it
working.
is.
I just sat and spoke for a good 18 minutes. A good 18 minutes. Y'all, now I'm looping. Okay. Are y'all able to hear me? Is everything working all right? I'm having technical issues again tonight. Oh my lord. All right, well, let's just go ahead and start over. Yang Gang, thank you for joining Securing the Bag with Seth Underwood. I am your host, Seth Underwood, and I have one question for you tonight. Who is the Asian man standing next to Joe Biden? That's right. It's happening. Oh, there we go. Great. Okay, so like y'all didn't hear anything that I had to say before this. That's fantastic. Great. I love it. Okay, well, take two is always better. Let's go. So the stars have aligned, and it appears that our wildest dreams are about to come true. Tonight's going to be an episode all about the upcoming summer 2019 debates. We've got 12 days from here, 13 specifically, until we see Yang on the debate stage. So very little time to do so. The singularity's coming, the machine elves, all this, all that. I'm looking so forward to it. Everything's lining up perfectly, and it's really making me feel vindicated. I've been saying for a long time that things are starting to change, and it just feels right. And I gotta say, it looks like the DNC is going about this pretty fairly. I just cannot believe where we are right now. We've got that. We've got the Poor People's Campaign. We've got some interesting Twitter activity. I did a straw poll. We're going to talk about that. Scott Santens is killing it as always. Lots to talk about tonight. Lots of activity. Let's just go ahead and get into it. Some quick business before we go ahead and start. I'd like to thank so much the new subscribers to the Dividend Report. I really appreciate the support. Continue to share this with other members of the Yang Gang. This can only get better as more people are involved with the discussion. Super special thanks to my first patron supporter. I very much appreciate you supporting my show and helping me facilitate getting Andrew Yang universal basic income into power and into reality. So thank you, and if you also want to subscribe to the Patreon, I am still thinking up of my tier and my reward sets and everything like that, but the offer remains that the first 10 patrons will have special proprietary access to me in Striking Vipers whenever it releases, and if it's good enough, maybe the first 100 patrons as well. I'm going to regret this pledge, I know it. All right, and then other than that, yeah, so 1,000 subscribers on the Dividend Report for $1,000 a month. Please help me get there. All right, and without any further ado, let's just go ahead and get into it. I'm super excited. Everything is like just coming into place, like I said. Very first that we're going to talk about is this story. Apparently the House committee is, I don't know which committee it is, but it's holding a hearing on slavery reparations. This is something that we'll talk about very quickly. Scott Santens is also talking about some of the pitfalls of current welfare, and that's going to build off of the discussion that we had yesterday. Lots of discussion about what we're going to expect in the 2019 summer debates. What are Yang's strengths? What are his weaknesses? What should we look out for? How do we expect it to go? I've gone through and taken the liberty of spending all of my time today watching some of the 2015, 2016 debates, and I'm trying to see exactly what may happen, and I'll get your thoughts on that as well. And that's basically going to be the overall gist of today's episode. You feel it, Yang Gang? Do you feel it? The tide is coming. So who is the Asian man standing next to Joe Biden? Because we just got our lineup. On June 27th, that's the second night, we've got Michael Bennet, Joseph R. Biden Jr., Andrew Yang, Pete Buttigieg, Kirsten Gillibrand, Kamala Harris, John Hickenlooper, Bernie Sanders, Eric Swalwell, Marianne Williamson. Somehow it does seem like it did turn out to be kind of like the big kids table and the little kids table, and Elizabeth Warren is unfortunately stuck at the little kids table, but that actually might be a good thing for her. I'm not sure. I think she may very well tear things up there. This is just incredible. I wanted Yang, Biden, and Sanders in a room together, and that's exactly what we're getting. It's also what we're getting on June the 17th, that's Monday, during the Poor People's Campaign, the Poor People's Forum, a specific discussion happening about income inequality and poverty. And this is just another thing which is like the stars aligning I'm getting ahead of myself. This is the meat and potatoes. I don't want to give everything away right now. Let's go ahead and back up real quick. Let's talk about some of these smaller stories here. House Committee hearing on slavery reparations. So, slavery reparations was a question that Andrew Yang was asked during his Breakfast Club interview, and so was Bernie Sanders as well. Now, as far as what the other candidates have said about it, I have not kept up, but this is a continually up and coming question. I expect that we will hear it at the debates. Really quick, just a brief kind of description. What are slavery reparations? Well, the idea is that, after the emancipation, just kind of expecting things to be equal footing is a bit unrealistic. And we talk a lot about systemic inequality on this show and how it's unrealistic, even just to expect two similar kind of ethnicity individuals, one from Beverly Hills, one from anywhere else really, to have an equal footing. We like to think that every person comes from the same beginnings and everything like that, and that's just not true. But doubly so is the case for the entire marginalized communities of ethnicities, the Black community, even Asian American communities as well, into like how we built this society from the back end labors of other people, and they're not given the kind of equal and fair shake to get them up to speed, right? Like after 100 years of how our society's been, there's been an entire group that did not get that head start, and we're expecting them to be able to perform in the same manner. It's not very realistic, but the issue of slavery reparations is a sticky one, and I'm going to tread carefully there because there's not entirely that much that I can say on the topic, other than this is a little bit of what Andrew Yang was speaking about, where we're saying identity politics is not really the way forward here. While the case should be and can be made that slavery reparations should be on the table, in terms of what that looks like in action, it's a bit tricky. For instance, like I said, there are also other marginalized and disillusioned communities within our country. For instance, the Asian Americans basically entirely built our railroad system as well. So are they also entitled to reparations too? What are the dynamics at play? Who gets what? Are you going to suddenly have kind of the thing that Andrew Yang talked about with identity politics harkens back to this idea that there is a frame or an angle of identity politics that can be used to get minority groups or people down lower on the socioeconomic ladder to just fight amongst each other while the wealthy continue to benefit. And it's more of a class problem is what we're dealing with right now than a political identity problem. And he didn't do a very good job in his tweet of explaining this, but this is kind of what I think of when that happens to be the case, because if we think of slavery reparations and we think of a universal basic income, which would go further in helping the marginalized communities that have the claim to reparations? Would a one-time check, and this is what Bernie Sanders said, would a one-time lump sum of $20,000, is that what's being put on the table? That's the thing, is this is what the hearing is for, I think, to kind of get a better idea of exactly what reparations entail. Does a one-time lump sum payment of $20,000, how are you able to quantify exactly the kind of repayment that is going to go their way? Is that fair, really? I mean, considering, like I've said in this show constantly, we don't necessarily have the wiring for personal finance on a long-term scale. So wouldn't a universal basic income actually kind of help these communities a lot more in terms of like reliable, consistent for the rest of your life? This isn't just $20,000. This is millions of dollars, and not just one marginalized community, but every marginalized community. Part of the pushback that Yang's gotten, which is so frustrating in a way, is that he's brought up the fact that now we do have a struggling majority which is losing its identity in a way, and that loss of identity will show itself up in some very troubling ways. And you can't be like Mehdi Hasan and turn around and say, I'm sorry, these people are losing their identities. Well, okay, the context in that was that we were talking about the alt-right, and like, but still, we're conflating that entire group. Some may be completely alt-right, some may be independent, but are also feeling a changing way of life. life is changing in so many ways. It's driven by technological disruption. Things are on a pace and a scale like the world has never seen. So we need to be grappling with change in all of these things. And just because one specific group has had quite a head start in the past, if they start going downhill, we can't just leave them to be left to their own devices as well, or else you're still just going to have problems. We have to lift all boats. That's kind of my push here, and I would definitely be all for discussion about reparations after the enaction of a universal basic income, should that be the case. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how that plays out, but I expect that this is going to be a point of contention during the debates, especially once Trump picks this up. It's going to be all over the news. You know, I'm surprised it hasn't so far. So that out of the way, we're going to go into a little bit more about what we were talking about in yesterday's episode concerning the inefficiencies of our current welfare system. And this is, again, something that I think is going to be spoken about a lot during the debates once Andrew Yang's able to make his point about universal basic income. Scott Santon's had some interesting tweets that you made today. So just real quick, I'm going to quote here. I want to get an idea of how controlling programs are, like WIC. And this is just outside of finances. What kind of benefit does it provide? Let's just talk about how controlling it is. What are the strings when we talk about strings attached? You want some milk, okay, but no whole milk, only 2%. Skim or 1% only. Do you want some eggs? Okay, but no brown eggs or extra large. Large and medium only. Want some cheese? Okay, but domestic only. In poverty, want some fruits and vegetables, okay, but no herbs, dried fruits, vegetables, or nuts, or creamed corn, or pickles, or french fries, or tots, or any fruits and vegetables from a salad bar, or party trays full of vegetables, or canned fruits that contain any added sugar. People ask why Andrew Yang's freedom dividend should replace stuff like this. Because it's controlling. Just give people cash and let them decide for themselves what food options make the most sense for them and their families. WIC is just paternalistic, authoritarian nonsense, and I completely agree. I push back on the idea of the welfare state in general because it is a nanny state, and that's weird because you hear the right say that a lot. But here you actually have the ability, because now we have a better option, right? Now we have the ability to go through and help the people in need who need it most in a way that's most effectively beneficial for them. You no longer need to go through and control exactly what it is that these people are doing every little step of the way with their money, right? Like, you know, and the thing is, it's like, if you think about, man, who's coming through and making up all of these convoluted types of policies and ordeals? It's a government bureaucrat being paid a pretty decent wage, I would assume. I don't know the specifics. I need to go through and figure a little bit more of this out, but I can guarantee it's a lot more than the person receiving the food stamps or the WIC payments are getting. And his job's to sit in a nice, cushy, air-conditioned office and use taxpayer monies to decide what the people in need, to decide how they get to spend their money. You know, what is it? 45% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. 75% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Are 75% of Americans inept that they can't make their own decisions for themselves? No, obviously not. It's patronizing. It's upsettingly controlling and strangely authoritarian. And of course, something like a federal jobs guarantee will continue to be more so, especially now that your clock is being completely monitored and taken care of. Like, it sounds like I'm being a little bit paranoid about it, but genuinely, I wish that we had a little bit more ability to take control of our lives, and that's the type of freedom that we should be aiming for, and it's the type of freedom that Andrew Yang is offering. And the other thing on Twitter here, I had a poll which had some interesting results here. I asked the question for a straw poll: would a universal basic income kill the payday loan industry? Leave your reasoning. Yes, no, or not sure. And after 1,009 votes, this is probably one of my better tweets of the year, the results came in. 55% of you said yes, it would kill the payday loan industry. 24% said no, and 21% said not sure. Now, what's interesting is that the people who said no were much more likely to leave a response in the comments. And let's just go through a couple of these real quick. I've got one here that says no, because we're going to have to accept that a UBI or any one thing is not going to solve everything. there are people with an extra 1,000 or even 2,000 or more that will struggle because managing money is an issue. Not everyone is going to use the UBI in the best way. Probably not kill, but significantly weaken, starting with the worst actors. A lot of the... Oh, that was Owen Poindmeister. Poindmonster. That was Point. Owen's great. Check out the Universal Basic Income podcast on Apple or anything if you're further interested in this guy. They have really, really hard-hitting discussions into the specifics of Universal Basic Income and its feasibility. In terms of the negative, like, no's, there was a lot of people are going to be stupid with money no matter what. And my overall thing is, sure, we'll still be able to find people who will be absolute idiots with their money, but we have to also consider the scarcity mindset that we love to talk about on the Dividend Report. You know, there is data and research to show that a lot of poor decision making is directly caused by financial insecurity, that you're unable to really make the kind of decisions that would leave you in a good place at the end of the month because you're already in poverty to begin with. And so overall, I think that the answer does lie in between, whereas it may not kill the industry outright, but you can be sure that it's going to take a pretty significant hit. Speaking of comments, let me just really quickly check the comment section here. Hi Seth, hi gang, missed the stream talking to some dude that wants to keep us all wage slaves, and now I'm off to dinner. I'll watch later. Have a good time listening to Mr. Crispy. Well, thank you very much. And yes, the people who want you to be a wage slave, they're out there. They're the majority of people. And I'm actually working on an article which is going to be discussing the hard conversation that America is about to have about work, or at least that I hope America is about to have about work and the purpose of labor in general. I'll keep y'all filled in into how that's coming along. So real quick, just a few more comments here. It would make them less predatory, I believe. I said no because I think UBI will stimulate all spending. So people are probably going to feel safer taking out loans, bigger loans this time. Now that's an interesting point. From what I've read is that the dividend would not be able to be borrowed against, but it's also not something that you can gift to other people. And part of the entire thing that I've spoken about is that this would overall help households with more than one adults, because only 1 in 10 Americans live alone. How many of those 1 in 10 Americans are solo living and unemployed at the same time? I know that out of the other 9 out of 10 Americans, many are households with people under the age of 18 who would not be getting their own universal basic income, but the vast majority of people would most likely be in a very close, in a very close distance to someone else receiving the universal basic income. So if you can't necessarily easily trade that with other people, which I find hard to see how that would be even regulated, like that's impossible to regulate. The entire point is that there's no strings attached to the universal basic income. But in terms of gifting it, I think that means sending it long distances, sending it to political campaigns, sending it to PACs or things of that nature. We would hopefully like to be able to gift universal basic income funds to charities, to specific demographics. I hope that there's maybe some sort of system in place that would facilitate such a system. So in terms of being more secure in the fact, like, hey, I'm going to get $1,000 next month. Out of that 1,000, I could spend it on the interest of a payday loan that I could go through and get right now. That's possibly an idea, but one of the things is that, like, if you can get a loan for 0 interest, right? If someone close to you is extremely wealthy and just wants you to succeed in some way, or he has enough disposable income to help you out, you always want to go for that possibility. So if you're able to rely on family members, on household members to help you out, I don't think that necessarily we would expect to see many people taking advantage of the universal basic income in a way that they would continue to pay interest off of it long term. But I think that there may be a point to be made there. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Go down in business but not kill it. Loans of all kinds will likely benefit from the universal basic income because there's a greater likelihood of paying it back. Again, that's kind of along the same lines. Scott Santons actually let a comment here that I missed. The basics of a income guarantee on loans and debt. Maybe I should have read that article before I started talking on tonight's episode, but you learn some. I'll read through that and I'll probably update us on Monday's episode. Oh my gosh, guys, it's Friday. It's Friday, Yang Gang. Like, the week's over. It's time to relax. Pop open a cold one with the Yang Gang. Or don't. Like smoke if that's maybe more of your thing. But vape. No combustion. That's much better. So, man, we're right here. Like, the next dividend report we're going to be doing is going to be on the heels or directly in front of. I don't know what time the Poor People's Campaign is happening. Maybe the stars will align and I can do the dividend report as the forum is going on and we can do it in live time. So excited. Really, yeah, I'm so excited. I want to get into the meat and potatoes here. Let's just skip right ahead to the main story tonight. It is what is coming. In June the 27th, the second night of the debates, we've got Andrew Yang in a room with Joseph R. Biden Jr., Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris. Marianne Williamson made it in. I'm very happy to see her here tonight, as well specifically this night, because she's the only other candidate that's really has platformed universal basic income as a core policy in her campaign. I know Pete Buttigieg has said that it is an interesting idea and that he needs to look more into it. So, maybe we'll get an elaboration on him that night. And Kamala Harris has flat out said she has no idea what it is. We know Joseph Biden, Uncle Joe, Sleepy Joe. I'm sorry, but yeah, I can't hold back any punches here. He's very anti-UBI, so we get to hear him come out and say that dignity is in a day's full of work and off the sweat of your brow, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all of that. So let's look forward to that. Eric Swalwell, Kirsten Gillibrand, Michael Bennett, all of these people coming together in one night. And like I said, we're going to have Monday, the Poor People's Forum, to get kind of a starter. It's the appetizer, if you will. The hors d'oeuvres coming around on a silver platter to the Yang Gang to get him a feel of exactly what's going to happen. They're going to hash through the discussion of universal basic income, and of course, mostly it's going to be unseen by the unwashed masses, but there's a better term for that for the Yang Gang. I'm going to think about it. The masses without money who are about to have money. So even if, things like in terms of the perception, whatever happens during Monday, it's not as important as what happens during the debates in terms of the audience involved. But it's like the starter kit for Andrew Yang to kind of to feel out exactly the discussion, the debate, to feel what Bernie Sanders is going to respond with, what Biden is going to respond with on the discussion of universal basic income, and that gives him the ability to prepare for how to come back and combat that once the moderators come through and allow him to give his spiel about universal basic income, because then the question will be asked or brought up with the other candidates and they'll say what they need to say, and ideally at this point Yang can follow up, because what I'm concerned about is that there's not going to be enough times that the moderator brings up a universal basic income, right? Like I said, I spent a whole bunch of time looking through the debates and the discussions that were happening during 2016 and 2015. And, all through these debates, the questions are being given to the moderators. With Andrew Yang, the specific policy that I'm so interested in is universal basic income. It's almost the other way around. Yang's bringing forward the policy. And so the only chance that we're going to get to hear about that is when he speaks, when he has the ability to link another question to his policy of a universal basic income. So that comes with a little bit of baggage right there, because you don't want the candidate to speak so much about this one thing, because even though I personally believe that it is kind of a silver bullet, it's going to take care of so many things, or at least get your foot in through the door on so many overall policies that it's worth talking about for every single question that may come through in a kind of grating way to an audience which is seeing Andrew Yang for the first time. And specifically, let me bring up here the notes that I've got about I was trying to find the very first Democratic debate because I wanted to kind of see how the introduction was made. At this point during this one in South Carolina, I believe this was in January. I've got a terrible long-term memory, I tell you. It's because of all that financial anxiety. It's actually been shown that it does a toll on your ability to have good memories. So, Andrew Yang's going to help us all remember things a little better. But at this point, the overall tone, the pace, the ability to get your ideas through to the audience, it's kind of been established by the candidates. So there's that. What I quickly realized is that, there's a big difference in giving a stump speech versus giving a a compelling argument in a debate. I was really kind of shocked at how good Hillary Clinton was at these debates. I was deep in the throes of feeling the burn at this time, and I didn't really want to give her kudos. Probably that was my own bias there, but she was extremely good at debating. And between her and Bernie Sanders, there was a whole one. Like O'Malley was there, and they just trampled right over him. There were so many times where he was like, "Can I hold on, wait," and they just cut off to commercial, right? And it was a shame what happened to O'Malley. I can't help but wonder who that will be on June the 27th, but I'm sure there will be one. Again, though, that was 3 people. This is 10. Yeah, this is 10 people versus 3. The dynamics are going to be completely different. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So yeah, South Carolina, Hillary, Bernie, O'Malley. I was struck by how similar a position it appears that Andrew Yang is. He's in compared to Bernie Sanders. It feels like, I've talked about Bernie Sanders pushing the Overton window, pushing what's acceptable to speak about at any given point during a political cycle. He was really there in his discussion of democratic socialism, of Medicare for all, single payer, specifically. That was the big thing, is like we're right off the end of the Affordable Care Act, and Hillary Clinton's coming through and saying, no, we really need to bolster the ACA, and Yang's coming through and saying, no, what we really need to do is just go through and enact a single payer system. We pay more per capita on healthcare than any other developed country in the world, and it's absolutely insane. So what that is that really mirrors where Andrew Yang is right now, given the question of how to face income inequality, how to face stagnating wages, right? The entire point that Yang brings up is that we are all focusing on a problem, but we're addressing the wrong, we're only addressing the symptoms. We're not addressing the root cause, and that's automation, disruption, globalization to a certain degree, but the overall changing nature of the economy and work and labor as we know it, which are difficult concepts to have, or difficult conversations to have, rather. So that needs to be a very powerful point to stick through him, right? Because I noticed that overall the discussion was very similar to each person when they were asked a question in this 2016 debate. And they all agreed. They were like, yeah, healthcare we need to improve. But no one said, no, there's actually a deeper underlying issue that none of the solutions that we're putting out there is actually going to solve. Andrew Yang's entire purpose here, the way that he's going to get through in a powerful way, is by running with that ball as hard as he can. And whether or not he's given the ability and the spotlight to do it, we'll have to see. Let me switch over here. I need to look at this instead of this, because I got one of these days I'm going to get this all smoothed out, I promise. Here, really quick, let's take a look at the comments here. Yang will smash this debate, an eagle amongst chickens. That's exactly what I feel as well. Sometimes I like to get very caught up in the universal basic income conversation. As always, I am first and foremost a universal basic income advocate, and that's what I want to see the most of. And I can forget that, Yang has an extremely powerful toolbox of policies at his disposal, right? The discussion goes to Medicare for all. He's got that in the bag. And specifically, I'm pretty sure that like Andrew Yang's really the only person in the debates right now. I honestly have no idea what Biden's shooting for. He's probably trying to bolster the ACA, right? So Bernie's shooting for the single payer. Obviously, Andrew Yang saying we shouldn't get away from all private insurance. Even a lot of Nordic countries follow a similar type of system. So the degree by which that might get hashed out, since there's so many candidates, there's not going to be that much time to even go into it. Overall, the broad reality is that Andrew Yang is for Medicare for all. He is for moving beyond the Affordable Care Act, and that is a popular policy amongst everyone on the left, as far as I'm concerned, or as far as I realize. So between the ACA to Medicare for all, I feel that's mirrored by overall, like, what are the solutions, right? We like to talk about how the thing that is politically expedient right now is more jobs. It's the thing that's been politically expedient since the beginning of the modern civilization, is how do we get more people employed and all of these things. But of course, that is drastically changing. And if you've read The War on People, The War on Normal People, you know. So he's got to come through and change that dynamic and say, no, instead of the ACA, instead of bolstering the system, which still leaves out so many people uninsured still, it's still a flawed system, and pouring money into the ACA is not going to fix the overall structural issues with healthcare. The same is going to be applied from Yang, pointing out the fact that no, going through and creating a federal jobs program not going to solve the overall issue of the private market disrupting and displacing millions and millions of retail workers, call center workers, truck workers, manufacturing jobs. They're not coming back. We can build a wall, but that won't stop people from losing their jobs from robots. That's his angle that he's coming through with here, and that's exactly the angle that Bernie Sanders was coming through with in the debate. And he got a very good reception during these debates. I like to say that it was all rigged against Bernie. He should have had the nomination in the bag. And I think he did a fantastic job at the debates. And I really do think that when Andrew and the campaign are looking at how they're going to be approaching these debates, I'm hoping that they're seeing how Bernie packed a punch and maybe try and emulate that in some ways. They go almost immediately into the discussion of gun control. They don't spend too much time into the economy, and you can tell that like Bernie is trying to get through to that any way that he can. Secretary Clinton, so this is one of the parts here. I've actually got it on my computer. I mentioned that I've been trying to do a little bit more of some technological tinkering on this tonight's show. So we're going to try and play some audio samples from this debate real quick, because there was a lot of very interesting discussion that happened that I think has some things to do with what we're about to see on the 27th. So I'm going to turn on my desktop here, and we're going to move over here. I'm just going to turn off the mic real quick. Yeah. All right. So we get the idea overall. He's got like the punches. You can hear it in his voice that so far I love Andrew Yang's stump speeches and everything, but I haven't like heard that kind of whatever that gumption is that they bring towards it here. And between Hillary and Bernie during that debate, there was so much like fiery kind of back and forth between the two of them, and it lit the audience on fire. It really was something to see. This is exactly what Bernie just said right there, how he was coming back to this objection that was being placed on him as, oh, he wants to get rid of all of these things that we've worked towards with the ACA. And he's saying, no, we're actually coming through and we're making a better system. This is going to fix the actual systemic inequalities. Again, like I said, this is what Yang has to do. He has to come through. And when they say, well, why don't you allow welfare recipients to also stack on top and benefit from the universal basic income, he has to push forward and say, we're not disrupting or dismantling the current welfare system, but we're making it so much better because there are so many inefficient ways in that we've been talking about in the past couple of episodes in which this doesn't actually help the people who need it most. Just like the Affordable Care Act has missed so many people, my girlfriend included. She's had a lot of actual issues with the Affordable Care Act. It has not helped her in a way. It actually went through and harmed her in some very kind of strange way that I'm still unsure about how it exactly happened. Something kind of like religious community health care versus, anyways, I'm not going to get into that. So I really, I want, Yang needs to take the gloves off. He already has shown a little bit of that with Joe Biden, but there was no one else there on the stage to respond to him. So we haven't seen him in the debate format yet. He's gone out and he has made the tweet that he was a part of his university's debate team and he knows what he's doing. And that was a very great tweet for him to make, but that he's never been in politics. It's one thing to be on a debate team and everything, but it's another thing to be in front of 350 million Americans, 350 million Americans looking at you to decide whether or not you should be the leader of the free world. There's no way that you can walk onto that stage and not feel an immense amount of pressure. But he's got this in the bag for sure. Let me see here. Seth, your channel is a smash. Great job. Hey, thank you. Thank you very much for joining along with the stream. As I've said before, if you enjoy my show, if you enjoy my content, subscribe, hit the bell, and share this with as many other people in the Yang Gang that you know of. And let me know, especially if you have people that you're trying to get into the Yang Gang. If you'd like to have me discuss some things or in that way, feel free to send them over as well. Anyone who's got any questions about universal basic income, I'm the guy to go to because I know exactly where else to go. Oh yeah, the audio didn't come through on our end. Great. Okay, so didn't hear the audio from the clip. I've probably heard it before and I'm still following. All right. So overall, Hillary Clinton attacked Bernie Sanders and said, "You're dismantling the Affordable Care Act." I sat there for like 2 minutes in silence. This is the kind of content that you guys subscribe for. I know it is. So Yang Gang's the greatest. Let's try this again because I've got another clip. Just kind of be on the ready if it happens again. The next thing that we go through and talk about, she comes back. She says the issue is even when we had a majority Democratic House, we couldn't get through the votes for a single-payer healthcare plan. It's not for lack of trying, basically. And he comes through, and this is where I think Yang can improve on the most. I'm going to go ahead and go off on a quick tangent here to back up this assertion. Today, Pod Save America came out, and overall it was a great interview. Go check it out if you'd like to. One of the things that I've noticed is that his response to the question, how do you plan on getting this through? How do you plan on convincing, the rest of the GOP, the side of the aisle to work with you on a universal basic income? We can't even get universal health care passed. How do you think you can make this happen? As he comes through and he says, the optics of this, when I'm elected on the sole position to get this policy through, they'll look at the Alaskan Permanent Fund, they'll realize this has happened before. That's really not the best answer to have. It's kind of like a happy-go-lucky, it'll all work out. You can't answer with those. You can't answer that, especially not on the Democratic debate stage. It's not going to go over well. I kind of hope, we're 12 days away. Can they please work on some other way of getting that through? There are also other things that I wish that he would shoot higher for, because if you are going to go to a negotiating table, you are going to have to give up some things, and that also is going to be included with the universal basic income. We don't want to have to give up the number 1,000. We don't want to have to give up any sort of the no strings attached universality of what it is. So I kind of hope that they change the rhetoric on that just a little bit. And this has to tie in with what Clinton said, is like, we had a house that was full of Democrats and we still couldn't get it through. And this is what Bernie Sanders comes back with. Again, O'Malley is nowhere to be seen. It's so sad. All right, let me see here. Oh, okay, no, I still got it. Okay, so I'm gonna turn on the desktop audio.
issues you've raised, the good questions you've raised.
You guys hear this
You
at
know
all?
what it all comes down to? Do you know why we can't do what every other country, major country on earth is doing? It's because we have a campaign finance system that is corrupt. We have super PACs. We have the pharmaceutical industry pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into campaign contributions and lobbying, and the private insurance companies as well. What this is really about is not the rational way to go forward. It's Medicare for all. It is whether we have the guts to stand up to the private insurance companies and all of their money and the pharmaceutical industry. That's what this debate should be about.
Well, as someone who has a little bit of experience standing up to the health insurance industry that spent, you know, many millions of dollars attacking me, and probably will so again because of what I believe we can do, building on the Affordable Care Act, I think it's important to point out that there are a lot of reasons we have the health care system we have today. I know how much money influences the political decision-making. That's why I'm for huge campaign finance reform. However, we started a system that had private health insurance, and even during the Affordable Care Act debate, there was an opportunity to vote for what was called the public option. In other words, people could buy into Medicare, and the votes for the Democrats.
Skip ahead a little bit here.
As Tom said, as big as a review.
All right, well, you know, at that point, that's where Bernie kind of comes through, and he says, yeah, you know what? The reason is because Congress is corrupt. Congress is not fighting for the working people. These are the systemic corrupt issues. And it's refreshing to hear Yang's take on automation and the issues that are actually affecting us. But like overall, the messaging that Bernie has about how the entire freaking thing is rigged, that is entirely powerful. And constituents are hungry for that message. And if Yang lacks discussion about the fact that, yeah, you know what? We need to get everyone together and on top of serving the needs of the American people first and foremost, then I'm worried that, you know, he'll be outshined by Bernie in the debates. Overall, though, like I was saying, look at the back and forth between Bernie and Hillary in that clip. They're both very good at what they do. Uncle Joe, Sleepy Joe Biden, on stage with Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Andrew Yang, Kamala Harris. Have you heard Joe Biden even at one of his own events? He does not have the kind of the oomph that we see in this clip. It's so lacking that I cannot see how we walk away from the second debate night with Joe Biden still in the lead after a week of polling. If he is still in the lead after a week of polling after June the 27th, I'm gonna eat my tie. Actually, I don't have that many ties. I'm gonna eat something. I don't know. I don't know. I'll do something special for the stream because I just don't think it's impossible, right? There's just no way. The caliber to which Bernie Sanders is able to, you know, lift the veil back, the moments where he hits back on Hillary Clinton and says, you know, you're a pawn of the establishment. He doesn't say those words, but he makes it abundantly clear that she's got her skeletons in the closet and everything. He's going to go through and do the same thing to Biden. And not only that, though, so is every other candidate on that stage. It's going to be a free-for-all. It's going to be a free-for-all. Uncle Joe is on the menu. And boy, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who have been creeped out or inappropriately touched by this guy who will enjoy seeing him get eaten alive in front of everyone on national television. I'm being a little bit extreme here, but really, this is going to be very entertaining. I'm going to get some popcorn. I'm going to kick back. Hopefully, if it's during like 7 o'clock or so, we can do this. We could do it like a live stream, you know? I'd like to have everyone in here and talk. Dude, Biden won't survive. There's no way. I completely agree. There's no way that he survives this at all. I don't believe it. July is his last month on the top of the leaderboards if he can make it that far. So we continue moving on. There's the real issue of Congress being owned by money, and we couldn't do what the people needed them to do. We've been talking about these issues for so many years, and that's the craziest thing too, is I go back and I watch this, and it's like so many things have changed since 2016, and yet so many things remain the same. They started talking about the opioid epidemic, and it was like, oh God, that's right. Like, we were talking about this 4 years ago, and still dealing with the consequences of our absolutely inept and completely corrupt Congress and overall inefficient system, that even just now we're getting to the point of saying, yeah, maybe we should be prosecuting and getting the pharmaceutical companies to experience some justice for what happened. And in fact, it was very interesting because they brought up the opioid epidemic, and Hillary comes out with her pre-made scripted kind of conversation about it all, and Bernie goes through and says, I agree with everything that Secretary Ms. Clinton has said, except I also think that what isn't discussed is the fact that the pharmaceutical companies hold a price on their heads for what they did, what their role in this opioid epidemic crisis was. And sure enough, it was like he was Nostradamus. We see them being taken to the courts today. So very interesting to kind of get that retrospective back there. And here we go with the one time that O'Malley really gets his spot to shine, and he does a wonderful job. That's going to be the last and final clip that I'm going to show from that overall debate here. So let's go ahead and just see what happened here. I'm wondering, again, like I said, someone's going to be the O'Malley on June the 27th. Who is it going to be? I'm kind of interested in Marianne Williamson in the ways that she may kind of be kind of the Mike Gravel candidate, the person who, since she has, it's not that she doesn't have skin in the game, but it's because she's so outside of the sphere in so many ways, she can really go through and point out inaccuracies in types of people. If you've listened to her speak, she has a very strong opinion on the corrupt nature of our entire system. So that'll be very interesting. Let's just go ahead and take one final listen here. This is O'Malley coming through with some fire.
Was running for governor. We can talk all we want about wanting to build a stronger Democratic Party, but Lester, the question you answered, there's no laughing matter. The most recurring question I get when I stand on the chair all across Iowa and talk with my neighbors is, how are you going to heal the divisions and the wounds in our country? This is the biggest challenge we face as a people. All my life, I've brought people together over deep divides and very old wounds, and that's what we need now in a new leader. We cannot keep talking past each other, declaring all Republicans are our enemies, or the war is all about being against millionaires or billionaires, or it's all against American Muslims or all against immigrants. Look, as Frederick Douglass said, we are one. Our cause is one, and we must help each other if we're going to succeed.
I respectfully disagree.
Secretary Clinton, my next question is for you. Here's another question from...
disagree with my friend over here, and that is, you are right. All of us have denounced Trump's attempt to divide this country, the anti-Latino rhetoric, the racist rhetoric, the anti-Muslim rhetoric. But where I disagree with you, Governor O'Malley, is I do believe we have to deal with the fundamental issues of a handful of billionaires who control the economic and political life of this country.
I agree.
Nothing real will happen unless we have a political revolution where millions of people finally stand up.
We're going to get into that coming up.
So boom, that was really intense. Like, kudos to O'Malley. He came through with some very, very powerful rhetoric right there. The only thing that he messed up on was calling out Bernie. Well, it makes sense why he did it, right? Because that's Bernie's shtick. But he called out Bernie's attack on the billionaires and everything. But Bernie's first and foremost, like, against the systemic inequality, income inequality that happens in the country. So Yang needs to look right there at what O'Malley did, and also incorporate how Bernie came through. Like I said, they're not going to give Bernie all of the time in the world he needs to do his speech on income inequality, his speech on why things are completely backwards and destroyed and rigged against the people. So what you see Bernie do in that moment is he takes that moment and runs with it. He gets his voice out front ahead of it, talk about, this is the problem, this is how we fix it. Yang has to be able to do that in some way. He probably won't have the same ability because, like I said, the dynamics are shifting. They're different because there's so many more people at the debates here. They probably won't allow for outbursts like that in some ways, but the more that Yang can wedge himself into specific issues and point out why his policies are the right direction, are the correct way of looking at the problem and the systemic issues and inequalities that occur, that's where he will be able to shine most. But in absence of that, he's not going to be able to really make himself shine because he's bringing in that new idea. When's the last time that you heard something like a universal basic income hit first and foremost? Like with the other things with democracy dollars, you can attack the issue of something like how do we get through and solve the overreaching problem of the issues of money and politics. He can go through and say, I've got a solution for that. It's going to be democracy dollars. Everyone gets $100 to give to their candidate of choice, their campaign of choice and everything, and boom, you can move on from there. He's got all the boxes that he can check, but that's not going to be enough to get him out there. We need to have as much discussion about universal basic income without making it seem like a quote-unquote silver bullet magic solution. It's going to be tricky, but I've got faith that the team is working on a very effective manner. Another interesting thing that happened during these debates was they brought on a YouTuber who asked a question about, what do you have planned for younger voters like me? And this is a good question. They went on and started talking about the demographics of the Democratic Party. And the big thing that they talked about was how far behind Bernie was with the black vote from Hillary. And then Bernie comes through and says, well, let's talk about polls first and foremost. Remember where I was at the very beginning and look at where I've come through now. And then interestingly enough, they talk about how the fact that Bernie was beating Clinton 2-1 among voters. And I was curious, and I went ahead and went over to the socialtrends.org, and I wanted to take a look at exactly what kind of generational and demographic shifts we've seen since 2016. One very interesting thing that I didn't realize is that Hispanics are being projected to overtake blacks as the largest minority voting demographic in the country. And so in that way, I don't know exactly if that may change the type of discussion. Like we had the discussion in 2016, how would you court this specific group of voters? Will Hispanics have their own time in the spotlight, so to say? But more importantly than that, the generational shift is what I was really kind of taking a look at here. So baby boomers and older generations who will be aged 56 and older next year are expected to account for far fewer than 4 in 10 eligible voters in 2020. This is a significant change from 2000, when nearly 7 in 10 eligible voters, 68%, were boomers, silents, or members of the greatest generation, collectively those aged 36 and older at the time. Even as recently as 2012, when the youngest boomer was 48 years old, boomer and older generations were about half of the electorate, 49%. The next presidential election will also mark the first time that millennials represent, who will be aged 24 to 39 in 2020, will account for a slightly smaller share of the electorate than the represented in the last presidential election. Well, that's kind of interesting. I could have sworn that I read something differently. The raw number of millennials eligible to vote is increasing due to foreign-born millennials naturalizing to become citizens, but the millennial share of the electorate has peaked as they are not growing as fast as the electorate overall. Meanwhile, the leading edge of Generation Z, people aged 18 to 23 in 2020, is projected to comprise 1 in 10 eligible voters, up from just 4% in 2016, when the vast majority were too young to cast ballots. These post-millennials are on track to be more racially and ethnically diverse than their predecessors. In 2020, Gen Z eligible voters are expected to be 55% white and 45% non-white, including 21% Hispanic, 14% Black, 4% Asian, or Pacific Islander. By comparison, the boomer and older electorate is projected to be about 3/4, 74%. So it's very interesting that, we've been hearing for a long time that oh, hey, millennials are about to overtake the older generations, but it appears that, we really are relying on Gen Z to come through, the Zoomers. Do we have any Zoomers in the chat? Because it appears that we're going to be relying on you first and foremost to help us get Yang into office. let's just go ahead and take a quick look at some of the comments here. I got the email from Yang's campaign. The debates are 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern time. All right, well, it looks like we're going to have a long dividend report that night. I probably won't be able to... I wonder how much I could get away with, like, just audio, perhaps? I mean, at the very least, I'll just do myself talking, kind of recapping what's being spoken about. But we'll have to see here. Yang needs to be more assertive. I agree. I like that he's kind of taking the gloves off. Maybe that, could have been like a testing the water, foot in the water and everything. He addressed that in the Pod Save America podcast today, where he said, I really kind of meant it in a joking manner, but maybe he's being, he's seeing the results of people saying, yes, let's have more of that. And he'll kind of follow along with that trend a little bit. Out of all the candidates, Yang has campaigned the most and the hardest. He has subjected his ideas and methods to the most scrutiny and tuned up his rhetoric as a result. No one is more prepared. Yeah, I ultimately agree. I want this to be his standout moment, obviously, because we want him to get as most notoriety, as most visibility as possible to launch him as far ahead as he needs to be. But overall, even if it is maybe lukewarm in some way or another, if he can meet the requirements and get ahead forward to September, like I said, he's already doing so much better than many well-known politicians and people. So as long as he does better than average, I'm gonna walk away feeling great about it. But overall, this is his moment to shine. This is the Yang Gang moment to secure the bag on a national spotlight, and it's as exciting as it is nerve-wracking. Right after the introduction was gun control. This is another thing that I noticed, that when they were discussing gun control, they brought up the voting records, right? Like Hillary Clinton's coming out and saying, well, my colleague Senator Sanders actually voted for this law and voted for this law. And I sat there just thinking, it's so ridiculous to sit here and try and dig away at Bernie's policy for gun reform. It's obvious that Bernie Sanders wants gun reform, right? So Andrew Yang is advantaged, right? We're talking about advantage Yang right now. One, he's got the ability to get kind of a starter on Monday during the Poor People's campaign, but also he doesn't have a voting record, right? Like that is huge. Like I said, I had a little bit of trouble finding the first Democratic debates, but for a moment I thought maybe I should check out the Republican debates, and then I quickly went, no, that's ridiculous, right? We know what happened in the Republican debates, but actually, the more I think about it, we should probably take a look at what Trump did. Trump and Yang are outsiders, right? Trump just killed it, right? He was a bit ridiculous. He brought people what they wanted during those debates. Yang has to bring us what we want. He has to. He does have to be more assertive. And he's got to just bring it completely, first and foremost. And if that involves him being a little ridiculous, this is tough. This is really tough. The GOP is different in many ways. Their entire rhetoric, their entire what they accept, what they appreciate is going to be different. We cannot afford alienating any portion of the Democratic Party, but in the same way, he needs to leverage his advantage as an outsider and do it in an effective way. And he may be able to. For one, they're not going to be able to attack him on his voting record, which is largely superficial anyways, at least if you're a candidate like Bernie, right? I think attacking people on voting records is effective if you've just got politicians who speak in platitudes and are willing to flip-flop on any issue, right? Because then it's just a question of how many flips have they flopped? And can you expect them to flip on this again, right? Whereas you can't necessarily make that argument as much with someone who comes across as an outsider and who's someone who is as genuine of character as Andrew Yang. Marianne Williamson also fits that bill. To a degree, I would say Pete Buttigieg also has an advantage in the fact that I don't believe has a very, a visible voting record other than like his time in office as mayor of South Bend. But, they're not going to be able to say, oh, well, Mayor Pete voted on this or that. So he's going to have a very special position in tonight's debate. He is a very powerful orator. Like I've mentioned, he's gonna probably he's either going to make it or break it, I think, on June the 7th. really going to make himself then. So yeah, the ball is in Andrew's court. The Yang Gang has to reach out and secure the bag. Our presence on social media that night is going to be extremely important, for sure. We need to get together and make sure that we're pushing forward there. I get nervous every time I watch him going onto a big stage. Yes, I do as well. And like I can see what he does, kind of pushing forward for like more of the hip kind of dialogue, where he says, you know, he drops the F-bombs here and there, but you can tell that some of the things that he does needs work. And I mean, I say that obviously because I'm so invested overall in the campaign throughout. Like, the average person who's watching it is not going to be as nitpicky, but there's definitely some improvement and some things that need to be changed. I don't know how he is going to be on a Democratic stage. From what I could tell, the kind of, you know, the kind of tone and characteristics of Bernie and Hillary, they pretty much matched up in what you would see during their stump speeches. So if what Andrew brings to the table during his rallies is the same that he's bringing to table on June the 27th, that may not be the greatest thing. You know, that's all I'm saying. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I'm obviously nervous. You all know that. Seth, did you link up with Nerds for Yang? I have not, and I've been meaning to, but it's been extremely busy. He also doesn't have direct messaging. I don't want to just like, do I make the first contact, or what if he's nervous? What if I'm nervous? Am I going to be Roxy, or is he going to be Roxy? Those are the questions that I'm. But no, I'm going to shoot him a quick thing, because he's got a very analytical view. From what I saw of his YouTube videos, he's got a type of insight and discussion that I really think that I could bounce some ideas, conversation off of. Like, really, if he would be interested in doing like even just like one live stream securing the bag a week, I would love it. So I've been meaning to send a tweet out to him. I'm going to do it soon. I knew Trump would win the nomination after the debates in September 2015. He came out and told lots of truth and said exactly what the people wanted to hear. I completely agree. And that's kind of, I went through a moment of just severe dejection after Bernie lost the nomination, and I was just kind of saying, it looks like Trump's got this. I didn't fully believe it until that night when it all came through and we saw that happen. But yeah, people are hungry, and that constituency are still there. They are still there. And even if things have changed a little bit since 2016, all it's going to take is, well, you know what? We haven't spoken about Trump for good reason up to now. But Trump is going to have a factor in this as well. These debates are going to go on. Trump's going to be tweeting all night long. And he's going to be rallying up what is left of his base. There seem to be some troubling polling and statistics. But again, polls and Trump, how much can you take that at face value? You know, it seems like there is a portion of his, whatever female support he had, seems dwindling very quickly. So he has his own motivations to rally up these sentiments again. Everything that he did in 2016, we're going to get a second dose of. So we don't want Yang to spend all of his time, you know, fighting Trump. This is going to be a huge thing at the debate. How do we take down Trump? What about electability? What about this? What about that? But at the same time, some of this gloves off fighting will need to interact with Trump in one way or another. I don't think that Yang should wait until he secures the nomination. If he secures the nomination, which I believe he will, if everything turns out according to plan, Yang will get the nomination. But I don't think he should wait until then to show what he can bring to a general election between the two of them. It's interesting. I don't want him to mirror all of the tactics that Trump did, but Trump did win for a reason. And the type of connectivity to social media that he had, Yang's obviously got that, but he could do a little bit more in some areas, I think. And some of the missteps that he's done with the identity politics tweet and the tweet about, you know, imprisoning the president and stuff like that, like when Trump makes a tweet, it's Trump being Trump, right? Andrew doesn't necessarily have that type of ability. He won't be waterproof like that. So he has to also watch his step in ways that Trump didn't, because, you know, it's so rah with that entire crowd. And to a big degree, that is what the Yang Gang is. That's why I'm so driven towards the Yang Gang, is that you can't take this seriously. You're gonna go insane if you do, right? Like, you're gonna go out there and secure the bag, and you're gonna have a good time doing it. That's the core quality of a Yang Gang. And that's also why I want the stream to get a little bit more popular, because I expect that to be kind of more of the tone as the show shapes together. I know Right Spider-Man, I love watching his vids. Right Alyssa Tom, a good guy. Okay, yeah, I really am interested in connecting with him. It's nervous. I'm nervous, that's all. Hi Alyssa, on Yang's website, I can see you on his background pic holding a camera. I want to meet Senpai. That's my pet name for him. I should probably change that name. I really want to meet Yang. That would be amazing to do. And I keep on talking to people on Twitter. It appears that like everyone in the Yang Gang has met Yang except for me. That would be so cool, just to like be face to face with this guy. Because I know like me and him would hit it off. We would be best friends. I want to ask him to play Striking Vipers with me. Who knows? Maybe one day. Maybe one day. A guy can dream, right? Hope my girlfriend's not watching the stream right now. I really hope she's not. Okay, so, man, we're going to be doing a lot more discussion about debates. I actually wasn't able to finish the very first debate that I was looking through and everything like that. For the next 12 days, we'll continue having this overreaching discussion about what to expect, what should Yang work on. We have, I'm not entirely sure what else there is coming up. Still don't know about Colbert Report, if that is a go or not. We should be keeping a close eye on Yang, seeing exactly what kind of preparation he's making, what kind of tweaks to his stump speech and everything he's going for. There's no way he can't be nervous. We just have to continue to give him some support, and he'll do just. He is going on Colbert. Great, okay, but that's still probably on the down low. Haha, Senpai. Yeah, Senpai's great. I hope he notices me. Oh wow, Intellectual Fox, I didn't know that. Cool. But we're not supposed to talk about that. Alright, you guys didn't hear anything. You know, it's times like this I'm happy that we're sitting right at 10. But, you know, I'm consistently getting views on these videos. You guys are so supportive. I love you guys to death. You guys are great. Thank you so much for the support. Y'all, I'm going to cool it down. We're going to wind down here and call it a night. Thank you for joining Securing the Bag. Join me Monday for a discussion about the Poor People's Forum. And I don't know when that's. Maybe it'll be too. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.